Do I know better? Yeah. Am I going to do it anyway? Yeah. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU here for another Legacy video, and Brian sent us a spicy one, and we're going to do a brief history lesson for a second here. Believe it or not, Sword of the Meek used to be a playable Legacy card, and it really doesn't look like it. Equipped creature gets +1/+2, equip cost 2 mana. 2 mana cost, not exciting overall. But whenever a 1/1 creature enters under your control, you may return Sword of the Meek from the graveyard to the battlefield, then attach it to that creature. Back in the day, when Tezzeret, Agent of Bolas was a playable card, and a little bit before that era, Sword of the Meek was often a combo card with Thopter Foundry. And people would go and repeatedly sacrifice the Sword of the Meek to the Thopter Foundry, which makes a 1/1, which returns the Sword of the Meek to play, and thus for every mana you had, you could gain 1 life and make 1 Thopter. And while an army of 1/1s doesn't seem all that impressive right now, back in the day, it was pretty strong. And we are bringing back that energy today. Our goal is to throw Sword of the Meek at our opponent's face for 4 points of damage. And then we can use the 1/1 Goblin creature tokens that we are getting from cards like Legion Warboss and Goblin Rabblemaster to return Sword of the Meek play. So we kind of get this engine that we can repeatedly throw things at our opponent's face without necessarily running out of artifacts or creatures, which sometimes does happen in these shells. We also have the spicy Goddric Cloaked Reveler, 3/3 haste. As long as 2 or more non-land permanents entered the battlefield under your control this turn, Goddric's a dragon, 4/4 with flying, and has fire breathing. Or, more accurately, red dragons, plural, you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So, the idea is, make a token, return Sword of the Meek, Goddric is a dragon, you swing in for a large amount of damage. Now, why in the intro did I talk about, I know better than to do this? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, you are playing a deck that wants every individual card to hit like an absolute brick or be a powerful card that is stopping your opponent. And Sword of the Meek is not an individually powerful card. And when you compare it to most of the other things in this deck, they are individually powerful. A Magus of the Moon or a Blood Moon threatens to end the game immediately. A Trinisphere is a massive slowdown for a blue-based cantrip deck, especially if they're playing free cards like Daze and Force of Will that are heavily taxed. So Sword of the Meek, probably not good in this shell. Goddric has a more subtle problem. This mana base is constructed so that you operate on an Ancient Tomb or a City of Traders +1 red source. Maybe that's 1 red land, maybe that's a Spirit Guide, maybe that's a Chrome Mox. But that is how this deck is generally built to operate. And so the red is going to be surprisingly difficult to cast. We've acknowledged the problems. Now we're going to try to do the thing, and hopefully we do the thing a couple of times, and it's pretty cool. Generally speaking, this deck is very powerful, and even when I'm playing some cute things in it, results tend to be pretty good. To Goddric's credit, if we are on a whopping 8 main deck Blood Moon effects, getting the red might be a little bit easier than in some of these other builds. Sideboard feels a little weird to me. Not bad, but slightly weird. We have some nice anti-blue cards, which I love in the Psychic Frog world, but we're really heavy on Vandal Blast, and I'm not exactly sure why. Artifact decks aren't exactly at the top of my mind right now, and 8 main deck Magus and the Moon Blood Moon effects means that we're not super scared of Urza's Saga. We also have Dead Gone, which is our removal spell, which I guess hits threats in the format. But you don't really want to gone a Psychic Frog. You would like to get rid of that thing permanently. So I'm not sure how I'm going to ultimately end up feeling about the sideboard. But should you need any of these cards, please consider checking out my sponsor, TOAMagic.com. Tales of Adventure is an awesome store. You always get free online shipping. Promo code ThrabenU will also save you 5% on your order, and they won't judge you for ordering weird cards for your mono red deck. At least I'm pretty sure they won't. I haven't asked, but they seem like good people. Anyway, let's battle. Well, my hand is certainly a keep, and I have to decide how we're going to play it. My opponent says they're a big fan. Well, you're in a video, so good luck to you. This is like an exceptionally difficult hand to play. I think I want to use my Ancient Tomb multiple times, so I think that means not Vexing Baubling immediately. Excuse me, not Blood Mooning immediately. The Blood Moon is better the sooner I play it, unquestionably. Blood Moon protects my lands from Wasteland. I could take a turn off to Vexing Bauble so counterspells don't kill my stuff. But I think, generally speaking, I'm okay with stuff being countered. I think I just want to try to end this game. I think I am doing turn 1 Rabblemaster here, hoping it does not eat a Force of Will immediately, and trying to aggro through this game. We do trade, notably Thassa's Oracle going to exile. So if my opponent does like an Underground Sea here, I'm super interested in Blood Mooning to try to keep my opponent off of appropriate mana. Yeah, nice. Like, now my Blood Moon is really good. We just want to keep our opponent off of black, black, black to cast a Doomsday. Ooh, nice. So, ouch. We're going to take 2 more. This is a threat. This is slightly easier to answer. I think the threat matters. Let's jam Magus, and we want to do this as quickly as possible. I can do another Blood Moon effect next turn. Damn. Well, we get a Psychic Frog for our trouble. That's not bad. Brainstorm means that Psychic Frog isn't coming down immediately, which would be the thing that would just beat me. If I draw a land, I can Vexing Bauble into Blood Moon, which is really strong. That is something that still is a mountain. Oh, shit. It is the Doomsday. So, Blood Moon is very good. Vexing Bauble with Blood Moon is kind of nutso. I also have a fast clock to close this game once I make my opponent's mana worse. Okay. So, there are 3 Lotus Petals here. If my opponent is playing all 4 Lotus Petals, then there is a Lotus Petal in their pile. I see 1, 2, 3 Brainstorms. Really wanted to draw a land there. I think we're just mooning immediately. So I am presuming that my opponent's hand contains, in some capacity, a Lotus Petal and an island so that they can go off through another Blood Moon effect. But if they were going to use a Brainstorm to win immediately, then I maybe have some time. Now I play Vexing Bauble so that Lotus Petal is no longer a blue mana source for a Thassa's Oracle. Fuck yeah! Let's go! So you can make an argument that I should slow roll this game and on turn 1 play the Vexing Bauble. I think given how many 3-drops I had, not deploying a 3-drop immediately was incorrect. I am happy with how I played that game. The game goes a little differently if Vexing Bauble is played turn 1. I just resolve a critical thing on turn 2 and this specific game ends earlier, but I don't know that that means that this was wrong. Now, in bad news, Doomsday is really hard to interact with in terms of sideboarding. So we're not going to be sideboarding for Doomsday, and this is going to sound really dumb. We're sideboarding for Psychic Frog because Psychic Frog beats us harder than Doomsday does. Like, Psychic Frog just invalidates so many of my attackers, and if my opponent gets that down, my Blood Moon effects are very, very bad afterwards. This matchup is going to be very fast versus a slower control deck like Bean's Control or something like that. Like, this is going to be super reasonable. It's just not going to be reasonable to do here. My Moons are good. My Trinispheres are fine. My Vexing Baubles are good. Goddric is the hardest thing to cast in my deck. Can I justify cutting anything else over this? This is a 3-3 with haste. like, haste is super relevant in the Doomsday matchup. Does it count itself? As long as 2 or more non-land permanents. It does count itself. So it's going to be a 4/4 haste some decent portion of the time. Okay. I don't hate that. We can, like, trim 1 Fable instead, keep the Goddrics. Yeah, realizing that it counts itself, this is slightly better than I thought it was. Turn 1 Mountain, Chrome Mox, Imprint, some card, play Magus of the Moon, off Spirit Guide. This is fine. Now, my opponent can get a basic on turn 1. Nope. Oh, fuck. We're going now. It is Doomsday. So, I can Red Elemental Blast for Thassa's Oracle, or I can just shove Magus of the Moon. It's potentially the illusion of choice. Like, a decent portion of the time, my opponent is just going to have Force of Will to back this up. But I can take a look at what's in exile and try to plan appropriately. Alright. Force of Will. Force of Will. There's no Dazes, but there is Force of Will. So, let's see if we can thread this in a meaningful way. I can. So, Chrome Mox. Imprint. Goblin Rabblemaster. City of Traders. Magus of the Moon. Force of Will pitching Psychic Frog. I can let this resolve and try to take out the Thassa's Oracle, but I think this is a game-winning play. So I'm going in by exiling this Spirit Guide. There's another Force of Will somewhere. We have gotten the string of asterisks in the chat here. GG's. Yeah, so that Soul Land was a really good draw, specifically because it lets me play the 3-drop while still having access to Red Elemental Blast in the same turn cycle. Hello! If you find that you're regularly enjoying my content and watching most or all of my videos, please consider supporting me financially if you're in the position to do so. If you're not, that's perfectly fine and good. Likes, comments, sharing my videos with friends, all that stuff means a lot. But if you are in the financial position to support me, my website can tell you all the different ways that you can do that. You can become a YouTube member or support me on Patreon. Becoming a YouTube member gives you early access to videos, and doing either one of those gets you access to my Discord server as well. Okay, I have a pretty good opening hand here. I have a lot of agency for how I play this game depending on what I see on the other side of the battlefield. Not the biggest fan of another City of Traders. Let's Chrome Mox. And I believe that this game is about Psychic Frog, based on seeing Underground Sea. Do we want to try to not lose to Psychic Frog? I don't think Rabblemaster matters right now. I am playing one of these 3 cards, any one of which in theory stops a Psychic Frog. I think I am playing Trinisphere first as the bait card. I don't have any ability to play around a Daze or a Force of Will right now. And we're just hoping to avoid turn 2 Psychic Frog because it probably wins my opponent the game, even if they don't play another spell for the rest of the game. Because that's how good that card is. Alright, there's a Troll. That's a basic. That's not great for me. So, do we eat Psychic Frog or Animate Dead or reanimate this turn? Statistically speaking, we probably do, and then we're very, very, very far behind. Yup. Okay. So my opponent has basic Island and basic Swamp at their disposal, meaning that my Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon are now quite poor. From here, the best way to deal with Psychic Frog is to make it so that my opponent can't just play a ton of spells, but unfortunately this incentivizes my opponent to just dump into Psychic Frog, which I don't really have outs to. It's a terrible situation. So if you wonder why, like, I talk about Psychic Frog in so many videos, it's because this sort of thing is just actively happening. Oh, are we just getting a Traxa anyway? I'm dead to that if my opponent does have it. So my opponent has a better creature than all of the creatures in my deck for the cost of 2 mana that also has put a threat into the graveyard that will singularly end the game with no outs. Okay, that's great. That's, like, very legitimately lucky. Note, my red removal, probably not killing Psychic Frog this game. Well, that's a card. This doesn't kill Psychic Frog, guaranteed. Okay. I think I'm just stabilizing my mana this turn, hoping that my opponent ends up with fewer cards in hand. Man, fuck Psychic Frog. This is miserable. Alright. Stabilize mana, play land, pass. Maybe we can end up killing Frog with Broadside if my opponent plays out a land and discards. I don't know. It's bad. Yeah, no. Okay. Yeah, so now we can. Yeah, my opponent's just drawing extra cards here. Like, yeah. Like, I could take up to 6 points of damage this turn and then be at lethal next turn. My Broadside can hit something for 5 that doesn't kill Psychic Frog, that doesn't kill Archon. Like, we're dead. Because my opponent had that first Force of Will, they won this game. Well, I mean, it was the Psychic Frog, to be clear. Alright, Red Elemental Blasts in, Unlicensed Hearse in. I probably need Fairy as well. This is an exceptional number of cuts, and I have to decide how I'm going to approach this. This was a game that ended on turn 2. Sword of the Meek is not going to be good. We are not grinding here. My moon effects aren't that good. My opponent has basics and the ability to search them up through Blood Moon, like Troll of Khazad-dûn, not necessarily doing its thing. My Blood Moon effects are still probably playable on the play and are quite bad on the draw. Same is probably true of my Trinispheres. Bauble feels very slow here. I'm going to try to keep the lock pieces on the play. And then on the draw, I think I'm going to have to adjust a bit. I could do something like Gone for Psychic Frog. I'm not super excited about that, though. Like, that is a mana inefficient removal spell. So on turn 1 here, I have to make a pretty tough choice about which card is going under Chrome Mox. Broadside throwing Trinisphere is 5 damage to a Psychic Frog, which might not actually kill a Psychic Frog. It's tough. I think I want to keep the Broadside in respect of Psychic Frog. So this is probably eating a Force of Will. And if this eats a Force of Will, keeping a Broadside is probably worse than keeping the Goblin Rabblemaster. But if this works, then this is my follow-up, so I don't end up eating it to a Psychic Frog slightly later on in the match. There goes a Psychic Frog. Like, our opponent is just passing the turn, so we should expect something like an end of turn Entomb here. I think I'm going to play this card around Daze, since I drew another Soul Land. Again, though, this is probably worse than Rabblemaster right now. Send in for 2. We're not throwing our Chrome Box right now. Troll or Entomb? It is Entomb. I have Fairy to help with that. Archon of Cruelty. The fact that this produces tokens to help protect from Archon of Cruelty is another reason why this card can be so strong. Reanimate Fairy, junking Archon, and we'll take a random instant out of your graveyard while we're doing it. So my opponent does not lose the life there. Okay, they don't have a follow-up play, so if I draw another threat, this game starts to look really good for me. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Opponent has 1 card remaining at this point. They junked a Consign to Memory. I'm not going to throw my Chrome Mox yet. Not changing Reanimate Math or anything, and having the Chrome Mox means that I can play around Daze. As soon as I draw another land, though, I can start thinking about throwing Chrome Mox. Sure. There's a fetch land. Opponent's passing the turn. They've got 1 card remaining. That's a weird draw. Is this a funny looking Lightning Bolt? This might be a funny looking Lightning Bolt. Send on in. Opponent goes to 12. I don't think the 0-cost cards matter that much. I think I am just going to throw Vexing Bauble at my opponent's face. Sure. I imagine this is just going to be a Surveil land to kind of select for the next turn cycle or so. Opponent's at 8. We are trying to put them out of range of Reanimate on reasonable creatures. My opponent can still reanimate something like this. It's not immediately answering my own Broadside, but I have to be cognizant of that happening. What did the Surveil land do? Surveil land junked Polluted Delta. Okay. If something like a Bowmaster is going to come, I want to know about it prior to the combat step, I think. So let's slam a Magus of the Moon. Okay, cool. We just win that one. Yeah. So opponent kept, what was that, a turn 2 reanimation hand with Force of Will backup. And Fairy wins us that game. Now, when I am on the draw, The Blood Moons, the Trinispheres, and the Magus of the Moons are all notably worse. I probably can't get rid of all of that. I could play some Dead Gons to have ways to take an Archon of Cruelty out of play. The issue is that like Psychic Frog just like takes it out of the hand. It's not stranded there forever. I don't actually solve a problem by playing Dead Gone. I just delay it. Delaying's okay. It's so easy for my opponent to fetch, island, troll cycle, swamp, and then my Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon effects are just terrible. Play draw difference here is massive. My opponent has sideboard Bowmaster's Fable isn't great. I think I'm going to keep all the moon effects. The moon effects still pressure turn 2 Psychic Frog pretty heavily if I can drop a moon on 1. This is a very reasonable hand that does not come in under reanimation effects or Psychic Frogs. I think on 7 I am willing to mulligan this. On a 6-card hand or below I might keep something like this, but we can fish for faster hands. Yeah. So this hand can attempt a turn 1 Magus of the Moon, which denies turn 2 Psychic Frog, which again is what this is all about. Okay. We're gonna try it. I don't love my prospects for this game, but we're going to jam here, because if I don't jam, Psychic Frog takes over the game next turn, or Entomb plus Reanimate takes over the game next turn. Alright, there's the Force of Will pitching Atraxa. Let's see if my opponent has end of turn Entomb or Troll. They do. I am happy that it is Troll and not Entomb, but Troll is still pretty bad. 5 toughness is like technically answerable via a broadside. It just doesn't feel good. There's Psychic Frog. So we were trying to prevent this. We failed at preventing this. It's very hard for me to kill that creature. I believe it is correct to play Goblin Rabblemaster this turn and Broadside next turn. Yeah. My opponent will just block this 1/1 token. Yeah. Yup. Now, Daze, Force of Will, whatever on Broadside is a disaster. I can block if I want to lose my Goblin Rabblemaster at the cost of 1 random card from my opponent's hand, so I'm not going to block. Psychic Frog just wins combats versus fair decks like mine. It's very frustrating. And every time the Psychic Frog connects, it gets harder and harder to remove it because your opponent has more draws towards the Dazes and Force of Wills that protect it, or Animate Deads reanimates that bring it or another terrible creature back. That's not great for me. Okay, it looks like we've dodged some of the worst case scenarios, outside of resolved Psychic Frog. So, does Magus of the Moon matter anymore? Not really. I think I'm going to try to resolve Broadside. Broadside plus Rabblemaster is a very, very aggressive clock. Daze is real good here. Daze results in me losing Wasteland and this spell. Sorry, losing City of Traders and this spell. But I can't really play around it. I'm under an exceptional amount of pressure. That's probably not a correct play. Unless you're Fatal Pushing now. Okay, that's fine then. Daze for Rubbins? No Daze for Rubbins. So my Broadside now doesn't have anything to fling. I probably don't get to play Magus of the Moon next turn. In a terrible spot. Effectively dead to a reanimation spell as well. That Thoughtseize gets to take my land. No, they are taking the Magus. I think I am ultimately happy with that. My opponent draws another card here, just doing the Psychic Frog thing. Note here that if I were to draw something like a Dead Gone, I physically do not have enough mana to even take the frog out of play right now. 13. My life total is probably relevant. This is almost never a removal spell that can actually kill Psychic Frog. I'm just going to do this tapped this turn. My opponent has cards in hand that they are not deploying. That is probably not good news for me. So that's a shuffle for the Ponder. Now my opponent gets a new draw at a Reanimate for Archon. Sure. Consign to Memory makes sense. That's a counterspell that my opponent probably did not have an opportunity to cast. Let's see if there is Reanimate. No reanimate or animate dead. So Vexing Bauble represents 3 points of damage to something, which is not lethal to Psychic Frog. Opponent's at 11. I will play a Vexing Bauble. It is another consigned to memory. Sure. I have nothing to throw with Broadside. I'm Hellbent. My opponent's top decks are so good. My opponent could have Surveil land at end of turn, which I think is exceptionally powerful right now. They do the thing. I'm very dead to Archon of Cruelty. My opponent can't keep drawing bricks forever. Alright. First is a card. Send in. Petty Theft. Sure. My opponent gets to play Brazen Borrower at end of turn. Oh. So, I can take the mana efficient play, or I can take the play that helps out with Archon of Cruelty and Troll at the same time. Probably have to take that one. Just can't let that stuff get reanimated. So my opponent is actually not going to let me get cards under Unlicensed Hearse, though, because Psychic Frog will do Psychic Frog things and just exile the cards. This is not great. So I am now safer versus reanimation spells, but it doesn't matter. I am probably just going to get 2-turn clocked by these 2 cards. Sure, yeah, and my opponent, recognizing that, just discards a land, a Psychic Frog, and hits me for 6. The extra card draws so incredibly good. Not really acceptable for 2 mana sources of card advantage that also do all of these other things to exist within Legacy, but we've got to live with it until December. End of turn. Take out Archon, take out Troll. My opponent will just lose 1 extra card from Graveyard to avoid cards going under Unlicensed Hearse. Okay. Ooh. Is that a Force of Will? Is that a Force of Will? We'll find out. Because I'm going to cast this Red Elemental Blast in my opponent's upkeep. I'm not going to give them another draw here. Destroy target blue permanent on Psychic Frog. Is it Force of Will? Holy shit. It's not. Sure. We still have an onboard problem. I can theoretically answer it with Broadside, but it comes at the cost of my Unlicensed Hearse, which is really, really, really a big deal. Take 3. Please don't play another frog. Oh, cool. End of turn. Hearse, eat frog. The second card doesn't matter too much. I will just take out some card that could grow a Murktide Regent. 4. This card doesn't matter. That's not what the game is about. We are going to cast a Broadside that I fully expect to get countered. Oh? Oh? 2? Cool. Opponent's at 8. I am going to remove reanimation targets from my own graveyard and then throw this to kill Brazen Borrower. So, yeah. And we are going to solve one problem, and we are hoping that we do not create another problem of my opponent's remaining cards being like Animate Dead plus Entomb, Animate Dead plus Troll, or whatever. Like, there's some chance that we are just facing down an Entomb immediately. Sure. We are exceptionally lucky to still be alive. My opponent drawing Consigned to Memory rather than real threats or removal spells. A really big game for us. Another land. Lucky. It's a Surveil land. My opponent likes their card. Fatal Push. Not great. My Blood Moon is a dead card, more or less. Like, I would basically play anything else over it. Yep. This is why we took creatures out from my own graveyard, was to try to avoid this sort of thing. My opponent has nothing to throw with it right now, so this is just a 3-turn clock. I will sometimes outspeed this, but I'm dead to a decent number of my opponent's draws at this point. That's no good. This kills me next turn. I will Blood Moon. It shuts off some fetch land nonsense. It shuts off Murktide Regent, potentially, if my opponent is playing that. But my opponent likes whatever card they currently have in their hand, because they topped it with Undercity Sewers. That probably does not bode well for me. Animate, Brazen Borrower. Yeah, this is attack for 2, fling Borrower at my face, and I die. Yep. What just happened? I think my opponent just activated Broadside, targeting Brazen Borrower, sacrificed Brazen Borrower to shoot Broadside, and accordingly did not kill me. My opponent has 0 cards in hand, and is now going to die to a Goblin Rabblemaster token attack. That is not a feel-good win, but I struggled for 10 turns against a Psychic Frog. We're taking that W. It's dirty. We're taking it.
Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, and honestly, they're just the best at what they do. If you need to keep your deck lists online, this is the way to do it. They have all sorts of different viewing options. You can condense that text if you like things to be tight. You can make them visual grids. You can put them in stacks. You've got all sorts of different ways to kind of view and visualize your deck lists, and they also have some really cool functionality, like allowing you to see playtest hands and even fully playtest your decks. So check them out.
Okay, I've kept the opening hand here. This opening hand is a great example of why Goddric is not great with the double red pips. So we're going to start this game off with Chrome Mox into City of Traders, and then we have 2 threats that we can play off of just that initial mana. And Goddric does not fit into that curve. I will have to sacrifice a land if I want to end up playing Goddric. I think I'm just going to put Shatterskull Smashing under, though, and keep the Goddric Dream alive. The viewers want to see a hasty attacking dragon. We'll try to give it to them. They don't get it for a little while, though. Opponent's at 19. We have a great aggro start here. Verdant Catacombs. Basic land. And Fatal Push. Sure. Well, I'm legally required to, right? I believe that I am legally required to make this play. No! 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 Sad attack for 1. 16. So we are probably playing against more of the same. Just more Psychic Frog nonsense. Snow-covered island, but not snow-covered swamp. We probably don't need to be thinking about something with snow synergies such as Icefang Coatl accordingly. Main deck Spellbomb. Okay, with another city here, I believe I am fine playing around Daze and throwing away a land. I just really need to resolve this card right now. Send in for 3. Opponent's at 12. I could fling a Goblin, I could fling a Chrome Mox. I don't know that it makes sense to fling either yet. We can still put some pressure on, like, Baleful Strix, Psychic Frog, cards of that general nature. Sure. Let's try to end this game quickly, though, before, like, murderous cuts and stuff start cantripping. Sure. Land drop, combat, send him. Opponent's at 9. Now I think we're throwing Chrome Mox. We're just going to take that damage right now while we can. I am not suspecting that my opponent is on a reanimate deck, given what I have seen so far, but I should respect it nevertheless. And I imagine that if this game lasts until turn 7 or so, my opponent is just going to win, so we're looking to end this ASAP before mid-rangey cards like Abrupt Decays and Leovolds and all that shit get online. Do I cast it? If I cast it and my opponent Force of Wills, they go to 6 life, I attack for 3, I can fling for 2. The Force of Will represents 2 draws. So it's the same number of cards, but it selects for cards in a way that I don't like. But it is just lethal damage. I think I'll go for it. Let's go for it. It may be better to not cast this, though. Yeah, this is exactly what I was just talking about. Pitching Daze. Okay, so I was correct to play around Daze. Attack for 3. Opponent goes to 3. I think we're just going to throw here. So choose target, throw this. My opponent cannot fetch. So something such as a Jace the Mind Sculptor can't just come down now without a natural land being used. Surveil land? Wasteland, sure. Love this. So this has to be answered, or when I get my attack step, I just throw this. Even if something like a Bowmasters comes in. Okay, we got a little lucky there. Like, I know that I am at 20 life, but this game was so close to slipping away. Now, super unfortunately, we saw no win conditions from my opponent, So we don't know whether or not they're packing like Tamios or Psychic Frogs or Jaces or Leovolds, Murktides. We don't know exactly, or Uros, but we do know that this is probably good and this is probably good. So I at least get that much information. My opponent's mana base is greedy, but also has a decent number of basics. When I am on the draw, I don't know how effective my Blood Moons are actually going to be at doing the thing. My Goddrics are staying. My Sword of the Meeks probably go still. And I trim some Blood Moons. The Magus of the Moon is at least a body. Cruise Hearse, it attacks. I don't think I want to sink mana into this versus the large number of removal spells that I'm expecting from my opponent. Like, at a minimum, I'm expecting 4x Fatal Push, and then beyond that, some number of Dismember, Murderous Cut, Abrupt Decay, Assassin's Trophy, Toxic Deluge out of the sideboard. Do I keep one? Does one make sense? I don't know. Turn 1, shut off counter spells. Turn 2 and 3 threat, and then Goddric gets stuck in my hand. I think this is fine. Immediate Ponder. And Shuffle. I don't hate seeing that. I'm never intending on using this as a removal spell. Let's go ahead and do this. And throw down the Vexing Bauble. Help out with the Daze Force of Will type cards, or bait them out of my opponent's hand here. If I bait out a Daze, then that means a Psychic Frog does not come down immediately, because that beats my deck. Just land and pass. Ooh, that's cool. Because now I can do Legion Warboss with Force of Will backup. Hydroblast. Alright, is this worth 2 cards to protect? Yes, considering Broadside. Force of Will. Nice. Attack for 1. My Broadside is now a very powerful follow-up, although the Broadside will be dazable. So we've got Warboss into Broadside into Goddric, and then hopefully my opponent's dead at that point. Ooh, I love seeing ETB tapped lands here. That's so good for me. Oh! Wow. That's worth giving up my land for. That is 100% worth giving up my land for. That was not in the plan. Play. Sack. Yaw. Broadside. Combat. Make my 1/1. Attack in with great violence. Mentor onto a goblin. My opponent's at 12. Then we will throw a token immediately. Hit my opponent to 10. I will hyper-aggressively Red Elemental Blast just about any spell. We just don't want to hit a Toxic Deluge here. That's the worst-case scenario. That's not great. That's not great. Oh wait, it's 5 toughness? If I throw Legion Warboss, that puts a creature into the graveyard, growing it to 6 toughness. My tokens have to attack. This isn't just like lethal, is it? But my opponent blocks a 3/3, then takes 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, plus Fling. I'm probably dropping Red Elemental Blast to attack with this creature. Alright, cast. Red Elemental Blast under Goddric. Oh wait, Goddric flies now. So make a token. So I have 4, 6, plus 5. Wait, 4, 6, 7, 8. I'll just throw whatever my opponent blocks, because my opponent can't block the Broadside. Yeah, we're good. So Broadside, target you, throw Legion Warboss, there's lethal, there's GG's. Okay, was scared for a minute, but we had it. Okay, my opponent has revealed a Yorion Companion. My hand doesn't really do anything. It's turn 1 Vexing Bauble into turn 2 Blood Moon. If my opponent is on blue Yorion stuff, uncounterable Blood Moon is really good. If they're just on something like D&T, this hand just does stone cold nothing. I think I can do better than this. It's gonna be a keep. It's not a fast hand. The worst card in my hand is the Sword of the Meek. But the Sword of the Meek is very cute. I can discard it with Fable that I play on turn 2. Bring it back on turn 3, equipped to a Goblin Rabblemaster token. And then start throwing it on turn 4 with Broadside. Let the record show that I believe it is correct to get rid of Sword of the Meek. And for the content, let's keep it. I think the additional land just potentially matters too much against what could be like a Wasteland Rashad and Port deck. It is a blue deck. Still could be a Wasteland deck. I don't think I'm going to play around Days from the Yorion pile. I think I am just going to intend on discarding Chrome Mox. Like, discard this and this next turn. Alright, make a friend. Mana problems solved. Cycling Lorien Revealed is fine. I am imagining that my opponent will probably be like 5-color Leyline Binding, Prismatic Ending, Swords to Plowshares-esque control. Maybe Icefang Coatl. Sure. Fatal Push. Yeah. Abundant Growth doing some work there. So it's these two I'm certainly discarding. Yeah. Now what? Blood Moon can do Blood Moon things, but my opponent will have access to all of their colors. Vernisphere is good versus counterspells. I really just want to kill my opponent before this game goes long, and I have 3 threats. So I believe that it is correct to just jam threat after threat after threat here and make my opponent have immediate answers. So we are going to do the Sword of the Meek thing now. So trigger, token, return Sword of the Meek, the Trixies. Get in there for a couple points of damage. Opponent's at 18. Mana spent on cantrips is very good for me. Mana that sets up a Terminus is very bad for me. Triumph of St. Catherine is also something that I should be vaguely aware of. Another snow-covered land. Another abundant growth. Sure. Blood Moon effects looking less good, but it's not like they're doing nothing. Alright. This comes back. We're just going to keep the pressure up here. I think I would like to live the dream. I think I would like to broadside here. Eats a Force of Will. Sure. Pitching an Uro. That's not unexpected. Send him. Rabblemaster is a lot of damage this turn. Opponent's down to 10. Facing theoretical lethal, but we should assume that some number of my creatures just get removed in this next turn cycle here. I would not mind drawing a land. Being able to play a broadside while also getting to activate Reflection of Kiki-Jiki seems good to me. Fetch land. Pass turn. That's not bad. It's actually probably better than a land. Terminus is really rough here. It has to be like another Brainstorm into a Terminus. I've seen 2 of the Brainstorms already. That's somewhat unlikely. Let's go, yeah? Okay, that is a fetch. That's great. Icefang Coatl. There's card draw. Yep. Alright, we kind of run over our opponent there. Alright, we did the Sword of the Meek thing. Kind of. I mean, my opponent conceded before we got to do the broadside throwing, but, you know, we were on that track. So we have seen Uro. I like Red Elemental Blasts. I like Unlicensed Hearse. We could play a couple of these sorts of effects. I'm not hating these for Icefang Coatls. It's not a good exchange of resources for me. Like, it's, in fact, a very bad exchange of resources. But it keeps my threat in play, and that might be something that we need to do. The Sword of the Meeks are going here, as I think objectively the weakest card in my deck. From there, it's a little tougher. I could see getting rid of Trinispheres. I could see getting rid of some Blood Moons. Oftentimes for these sorts of matchups, I like to be more threat dense. I am technically adding 2 Unlicensed Hearse as threats. My opponent is on the play. They get to fetch a basic. They have intense mana requirements. I maybe go down on these on the draw where my opponent can fetch the basic. Play another one of these over that last Blood Moon, or I could just keep 5 Blood Moon effects. Play 1 more of these to just get Icefang Coatls out of the way and have an extra out to something like an Uro. This is a very slow hand, and I think, quite clearly the beatdown in this matchup. I do not want to drag the game on, and I think my opponent is likely to outvalue these cards. I will mulligan accordingly. Oh, this one's a gamble. It's a gamble that I believe that I am taking, but it is a gamble. So a red land on turn 1 makes this hand just absolutely batshit insane. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. So Chromox. So the next question is, now what? Like, do I want to shut off the counter spells at the expense of one copy of Goblin Rabblemaster? Or would I like to just play Rabble into Rabble into Rabble? Against the Yorion deck, I think we're just out here rabbling. So this is not going to accomplish any damage this turn, but it is going to accumulate critters, and that is something that I care about. And we'll see how my opponent views this Tamiyo. If I were the opponent, I would be looking to flip this thing ASAP. The plus ability on the backside is very strong versus Goblin tokens in particular. 2 mana Psychic Frog. Fuck. How big is Psychic Frog? Potentially has 5 power, which is bigger than Goblin Rabblemaster. I hate this card. Goblin Rabblemaster can attack as a 4 power creature if I play another Goblin Rabblemaster, which requires my opponent to discard most of their hand if they want to keep that Psychic Frog. How does my opponent view that? With a Psychic Frog and a Tamiyo and a Clue, I would be willing to discard all 4 cards to that, personally. I think that means playing Fable of the Mirrorbreaker this turn, and trying to loot through to a Pyroblast to answer Psychic Frog. Oh, I hate it. So I will give up 1 Goblin token here. Now this is a Goblin for the purposes of Goblin Rabblemaster, so we can potentially just swing in next turn with more Goblins. Sometimes my opponent is just flying in with Psychic Frog this turn, or just attacking with it. Again, I can't really block that creature profitably. This Tamiyo is going to be a problem. Okay, yep, so opponent is giving it flying, not even giving me the option to block, and getting to draw their cards. We are in terrible shape, because my opponent now turns Tamiyo into the Planeswalker. The plus ability is very strong right now, and if my opponent has a Fatal Push, it's a disaster. Yep. Alright. Shatter Skull Smashing. Not killing Psychic Frog. I can do it for X equals 2, not killing that, not killing that. So I think we are looting through these cards. Not the best. I'd like to be able to attack with the largest possible creature next turn, which means Goblin Rabblemaster. Yeah. So we will attack Tamiyo for 1 point of damage and call it a turn. This is a terrible position. My opponent could sacrifice their Tamiyo to get Fatal Push to get rid of my Goblin, or they could just continue to plus Tamiyo and decrease the power of my Go Wide token plan. I think both are perfectly valid. Like, Tamiyo has generated a Clue already, prevented a few points of combat damage, and will do at least one other thing on top of that. Like, my opponent has gotten appropriate value for their 1-drop. Alright, Psychic Frog flies, so I don't have any agency in blocking. So my opponent is just going to spiral this game out of control. Tamiyo pluses, so I'm not getting good damage in. Joy! Okay. This is kind of neat. This is attacking as a 1-2, so I'm not getting through the Tamiyo. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana this turn. I have 6 if I attack with this. I could give up this to play Legion Warboss into Legion Warboss, or Legion Warboss into Goblin Rabblemaster. Going wide doesn't really make sense when this is plussing, though. So we're going to play a Legion Warboss. We will attack in vain. Sure. Pitching Consign to Memory. So now that I don't have one of these, do I want to give up Goblin Shaman token to make another creature? No, I don't think I do. I'm still losing combat to these Psychic Frogs despite having more creatures, though. Cracking a Clue. Plussing Tamiyo. This just ultimates next turn. Yeah. So I can generate a hasty Goblin Rabblemaster and attack in. It just gets blocked. My Go Wide creatures aren't really doing anything. Shaman token and Rabblemaster could get blocked. And at the point where my opponent draws half of their library, I don't think I realistically win. I am okay conceding here. Very heavy on the basics. So we got the Blood Moons in the sideboard already. I'm good with that. Dead doesn't kill Tameo, notably. I think I am running this back as is. I'm just not the most excited here. Psychic Frog is so fucking good. Multiple Sokenzen is not what I want. I think I'm going to keep the hand, though. It's not fast. It has a plan. The plan in some capacity is disrupt, take over the graveyard, win later. Like, I have lock pieces, I have threats, I have mana. I am not excited about my hand. I don't think my hand is good. I think half the time I am probably still going to lose this game. But I think I have a reasonable plan, and my opponent has mulliganed once. I think this is fine. So, given that my opponent has played a tapped non-basic land, I think this is an okay turn to jam Magus of the Moon. Magus of the Moon is more impactful the earlier in a game it is played. I'd be very happy to get a Force of Will for this. If Magus of the Moon makes it around the table at least once, I can potentially just like play out another land and ignore my City of Traders problem. Okay, there's island cycling. So my opponent does have some degree of basic mana here. Okay. Am I into Trinisphere? I think I'm into Trinisphere. I should technically attack first, but it doesn't really matter in this spot. Send it. All right. I think my opponent is still favored in this game. Abundant Growth. Yep. So my opponent's Mystic Sanctuary now taps for any color. My Magus of the Moon has been mitigated a bit. Red Elemental Blast is cool. It's very mana inefficient with Trinisphere, but it gives me an out to a Psychic Frog. So if my opponent, say, plays Psychic Frog, they tap out for that. I then get to Red Elemental Blast. So I think I am ultimately good with this. What about Shatterskull Smashing? I think that's just a land. If for some reason if for some reason my Trinisphere is answered, this is on in this turn cycle if I play that land. There's a Psychic Frog. While that's still on the stack, I'm going to go ahead and just eat things out of the graveyard. Psychic Frog only removes things in sets of 3. So now I get to Red Elemental Blast this creature out of play. But we're going to give my opponent a chance to discard a card first. Like, I'm going to attack into this creature. My opponent can't Force of Will Red Elemental Blast. So we're going in. We're going to see if we can get an extra card out of this Psychic Frog. Yeah. No blocks. The fear is real. 14. Red Elemental Blast on Psychic Frog. Get out. Last turn. I've got Hearse to eat Frog. Hearse is going to start outgrowing Magus of the Moon in terms of threat size. All right, seems like we're chilling. Hearse eats Psychic Frog. Note that Hearse is 2 cards from a single graveyard, so I can't split and also get my Red Elemental Blast under there. Sure. This is suspicious. I believe that I am interested in pre-combat Magus of the Moon. 2 snow lands. I don't have to worry about Death Touch yet. I think I can just crew this turn and attempt to swing in with both of these creatures. I have another unlicensed Hearse to replace this one if something happens to it, like it gets Boseju'd or something. Orcish Bowmasters, sure. Okay, yeah, opponent is interested in eliminating my unlicensed Hearse. That's fine. I have another one, and they're not exactly great in multiples. The opponent's at 12. There's an Uro. So we would love for our opponent to not put in a land. If our opponent does not put in a land, I always just resolve unlicensed Hearse, and Force of Will is not a thing. Ooh, Yori into hand. Fuck yeah. That's quite good for me. So now I know that I can resolve unlicensed Hearse this turn. I think doing so is more important than getting a couple more points of damage in immediately. So, new unlicensed Hearse. We'll just keep the graveyard count low. I don't think I'm playing Shatterskull Smashing as a land. Sometimes that becomes my way to take a Yorion out of play. My opponent starts using that to try to stabilize the board. I can also just make an unlicensed Hearse that is larger than Yorion. So we've got another land drop. My opponent has kind of paid for something and unpaid for it. I'm not sure exactly what's coming. It's a new abundant growth. So Yorion in the not too distant future is going to be very strong. Gonna draw a few cards. The cards are less good with Trinisphere, making it so that it's harder to deploy said cards. Like a Pyroblast where I hit this Yorion and then immediately attack for 4 is really strong, for example. But now my opponent gets to draw 2 more cards. Legion Warboss. That's an interesting one. So I can do a Shatter Skull Smashing for X equals 3, which does not kill Yorion. But it does if I'm willing to sacrifice 1 copy of Magus of the Moon. I believe that I am willing to do that. Yeah, I am willing to do that. Send it. And this is one of those times where my opponent is probably willing to accept the trade of resources. So 2 damage marked on this of its 5 total toughness. So yeah. Keep this one. And then kill Yorion. So now I have the ability to eat this from graveyard. I'm more likely to just eat 2 cards from my own graveyard, though, to grow this. Every point of damage matters here. It's pretty likely that, like, one of my lock pieces, if not multiple of my lock pieces, leave play this turn, though. I think my house of cards is falling apart. Wasteland's good if my Magus leaves play. Not great, but good. Ooh, yeah. Seems good. So we now have 2 cards over there in that graveyard. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah. Psychic Frog, very, very good here. Grist, very, very good here. We probably don't get to attack with Magus. Got to attack with a 4-power unlicensed Hearse. That does not beat Psychic Frog in combat. That sucks. So let's Legion Warboss. I'm going to go to combat. I'm going to make a 1/1. It attacks each combat if able. I am then going to crew so that I don't just nakedly attack this token in for no good reason. So let's crew. This is a creature. Again, the attacks with it into Grist don't super make sense. I'm just going to pass the turn here. And then next turn, I have a Hearse that is bigger than my opponent's stuff. The Psychic Frog hopefully doesn't fly. That sucks. If I crew unlicensed Hearse, Grist can insect token minus kill Hearse. I don't think I can lose the Hearse. That occurs, which means Psychic Frog gets in this turn. And my opponent gets to fetch a couple of basic lands, which means the Magus of the Moon effect is just not as impactful moving forward. Sure. So my opponent could have attacked with insect token first. I think they missed a point of damage. I don't know that it's going to matter. Yeah, sure. So now I can't really take these cards out of graveyard effectively. Opponent did not attack. Not saying that's wrong, but they didn't. So if I want this to be a large enough creature to kill my opponent's stuff, I need to eat stuff from my own graveyard this turn rather than my opponent's graveyard. On the off chance that my opponent has reanimation effects, I am going to remove creatures from my own graveyard here. So I only get to play 1 spell this turn. Which spell is it? My opponent also gets to play 1 spell. It could be Brazen Borrower. I think I'd still like to shut off fetch lands. Let's do the Magus of the Moon that my opponent knows about. Ooh, it hit play. 6-power creature in theory. That beats Psychic Frog in combat. Crew 2, like so. Go to combat. Face or Grist? Face is not bad with Goblin Rabblemaster here. I think I like Face. I think it's a moot point. I think a removal spell is just happening. My opponent didn't play Brazen Borrower. Yeah. Illusion of choice. I also don't remember what game we're in. I don't remember if this is like game 2 or 3 or whatever. I'm a little lower on clock than my opponent. There's been a relatively technical game. Wrist happens. All right, match tied. So this is game 3. All right, so no worries. Witherbloom Command. Takes out my blocker for Psychic Frog. Graveyard's very full. My opponent gets a Wasteland back. I think at this point, Psychic Frog just carries these last few turns. All right, yep. Like, the Psychic Frog is larger than my stuff. My opponent can pivot to defensive as soon as they need to. We don't have a lot of agency here, so we'll play the cards that we have. Make token. I think I'm pressuring Grist, but I don't think this goes well. Okay, we're getting a chump block, poking Grist down to the point where if my opponent like does something like Brazen Borrower, attack for a decent amount of damage, then Grist minus kill one of my creatures, that the Grist is gone. That's relevant. The new Witherbloom command, sure. Opponent getting another land. Graveyard's very stacked for this Psychic Frog. Okay. Frog flies. The frog is bigger. The frog is bigger. Yeah, this is my opponent just like saying like, we're racing. I think I'm going to get hit for 8, and then I think my opponent is going to kill one of my creatures with Grist. We'll see if I'm right, though. Yep. So I imagine Goblin Rabblemaster is going right now. Yep. I've got another one. I'm going to play this City of Traders while it sneaks into play easily. New Goblin Rabblemaster. Punchies. No. No, stop it. No. I don't like it. Undo. Veto. Yeah, that's so good. I mean, I'm hitting for 2. Opponent's at 6. I am dead to Psychic Frog in 2 turns. My opponent has enough things in Graveyard where I can't ever reasonably block it. I am not sure if I am on outs anymore. I could draw Pyroblast for Psychic Frog, I guess. That's fine. Well, cast Broadside. Are we getting there? Oh, Brazen Borrower doesn't block these things. If I get through, I throw something, and that is game. Oh, it's a long pause. Send it. It is Orcish Bowmasters. So my opponent... this isn't good enough, right? My opponent pings me. They can double block Broadside. I throw Trinisphere at face, and then they die to Magus of the Moon combat damage. They need another card. Okay. Broadside, target you, throw Trinisphere. This opens up my opponent to cast a spell, but this is lethal damage if my opponent does not have another thing. 1? Come on. Oh, we got the GG. Wow. It's Icefang Coatl as the last card. So the Trinisphere was not out of play until after blocks had been declared, so my opponent can't Icefang Coatl. Wow. All right, my opponent has revealed Devourer of Destiny, meaning that they are playing Eldrazi. So let's just try to kill our opponent. We're going to ignore this Vexing Bauble. We're just playing Rabblemaster into Rabblemaster. Like, we're here to fuck. If we draw a Blood Moon, cool. We're hoping to win game 1 and game 3 in all likelihood. Like, this is a hyper-aggressive start on my end. Opponent does not want additional mana. Okay, they've got mana. Glaring Fleshraker is the scariest thing here. Don't care about that. Oh, shit. Yeah. I'm into that. Punchies. With Goblin Friends. Send them. 6 damage immediately. Putting my opponent to 13. And we drop Magus of the Moon for some short-term mana denial. This is what we want to be doing. This feels real good. Yes. Play land. Play second Rabblemaster. Opponent does not have colorless mana right now. We don't have to worry about something like Kozilek's Command. Yeah. Fuck yeah. Let's go. We are probably going to do minimal sideboarding here. The Dead Gons are probably the only playable thing. Like, Unlicensed Hearse, I guess, has some text. Sword of the Meek's not good. Vexing Bauble's not good. Do I want Sword of the Meek or Unlicensed Hearse more than I want Vexing Bauble? Vexing Bauble is a slow redraw. Unlicensed Hearse, in theory, can get larger than some of the Eldrazi creatures. I think I'd rather just have redraws at Blood Moon. We'll keep Goddric. Oh, I have Trinispheres down here that are off screen. Those are very bad. In which case, I will end up keeping 2 of these, or alternatively just playing something like Vandal Blast as a red card that can go under Chrome Box, but I only have 2 copies of Chrome Box, so probably not. I don't really like either of these cards. I'm going to go with Sword of the Meek, because it's the fun thing that probably ends up in the thumbnail. Turn 1, Magus of the Moon. Yep. Is the hand perfect beyond that? Nope. But are we keeping Magus of the Moon hands or Blood Moon hands just about every time? Yep. Opponent mulliganing very aggressively here. Ancient Tomb, Lotus Petal, Glaring Fleshraker would be just absolutely terrible for me, but it doesn't happen. So, let's see if we get a freebie here. Opponent responds. Kozilek's command, making 0 spawns and scrying? 0 to top, 0 to bottom? Okay. I'm confused. They just like mean to sack something with Lotus Petal and then didn't? I'm going to play this as a land. That way, if Magus dies, I have good mana. I have a backup Magus of the Moon next turn. Send in for 2. Opponent is at 16. Play a Vexing Bauble. It stops another Lotus Petal or a like Chrome Mox Diamond sort of card from coming down. Sowing Mycos Spawn. You've got it. Opponent can potentially get a basic land here, which is fine. I'm going to just cycle this, turn it into a new card. I could bounce that out of play. That doesn't feel great. Multiple non-land permanents aren't entering right now. I could attack with Goddric, attempt to trade for Sowing Mycos Spawn. I think, just going to play a redundant Magus of the Moon. Like, let's not... Sure, this is scary. This represents a lot of colorless mana. And my opponent had a Lotus Petal that Vexing Bauble was holding back. Sure. This is a 2-power creature, though. So, land drop, dead it, Goddric, combat. I'll send it in. I will offer a trade for Sowing Mycos Spawn. If Sowing Mycos Spawn leaves play, Magus of the Moons get to start attacking. So I'm not sure if my opponent would want to take this trade. Goddric getting Fire Breathing right now would be cool. I don't really know that it's going to happen, but it would be cool. Not double blocking here. I'll just take this damage. Sure. Also sure. I have a dead Gone for if something weird happens in combat here. Nope. Opponent is down to 6. Hope I don't eat a All is Dust. It's like land All is Dust in the remaining cards would be a little rough. What is opponent doing? Opponent is scrying and making spawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I can't dead 1 to keep my opponent off of something like an All is Dust. I can take a large blocker out of play, and my opponent kept a card they liked. So that presumably should mean that they are not dead. There's a kicked Sowing Mycos Spawn, taking out my true red land, giving my opponent access to green mana. My attacks are not currently great. Oh, that's hella good, though. That's very strong. So, play Broadside. How do I play this? If I attack with everything, my opponent can, in theory, put blockers in front of everything. I can mess with combat quite a bit via Broadside. What if I dead an Eldrazi Spawn token? That seems good. So I dead an Eldrazi Spawn token. My opponent cannot block everything. At least 2 damage gets through. I can throw some additional damage somewhere else. I think that works. It works assuming no weird removal spell. Yeah. Dead on Eldrazi Spawn. Send them. Yeah, so this is going to end up being lethal. 2 from Broadside, 3 from a throw. So this is fine. This is 4 from copies of Magus of the Moon. Yeah. My opponent's going to puzzle through it, but I think it's lethal. Okay, so my opponent blocks like this. I have 2 incoming damage from this creature. So now I want to throw one of the copies of Magus of the Moon at my opponent's face directly for 5 damage. And then the remaining 2 damage is dealt by this creature. And there is a trophy, folks. So we get to put Sword of the Meek and Goddric into the 5-0 decklist dump. Alright, it always feels nice to go undefeated, but let's be real about this league. We went undefeated because one of my opponents misclicked a lethal broadside trigger and killed their own creature. So, like, this is a 5-0 league with an asterisk next to it. And I also don't feel like I was playing the better deck in many of my rounds. Psychic Frog is so good, so powerful. My red removal doesn't answer it. the majority of my threats just get walled by Psychic Frog. Like, despite the 5-0 here, I don't know that I walk away going like, man, I want to register this deck for my next event. As we saw in the last round versus Eldrazi, we can put a lot of pressure on the opposing Eldrazi mana base by playing 8 main deck copies of Magus of the Moon and Blood Moon. But ultimately, this was something that I think I underestimated in the deck tech because I missed that it was going to count itself. But sometimes this isn't going to be the 4/4 flying with fire breathing that you really need it to be. And I think the Sword of the Meek stuff is just too cute. Like, that could just be 2 more Chrome Mox or 2 more threats, 2 more mana sources, another Vexing Bauble. I would not recommend playing the thumbnail cards, so to speak. Like, we did do some stuff with Sword of the Meek, we did do some stuff with Goddric, but I think there's probably a reason why you don't see these things in the flex slots of the deck. I still don't like the sideboard, despite the fact that we 5-0'd. Like, I love these 8 slots. Like, I am down with these 8. I think these could be played with a little bit. Like, maybe you go up to 6 Pyroblast effects because just having that many answers to Frog is so important. I like Vexing Bauble over Chalice of the Void. I did not even think about Chalice of the Void once in this entire league. I think if you want to lean on 1-drops for post-sideboard games, I think playing Chalice of the Void in the main deck doesn't really make a lot of sense anymore. And like Murktide Regent, Tameo, Psychic Frog, like so much of the fair blue stuff right now is answerable via Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast. Whereas when Grief was legal, Pyroblast's effects were missing Griefs and Trolls. Maybe you still need some number of Dead Gones. I'm still not entirely convinced that I boarded correctly versus the hybrid Reanimator decks. Maybe it's a, like, I begrudgingly play this card even though it is bad versus Psychic Frog thing so that you have outs to the graveyard-oriented creatures, or maybe you just play more unlicensed Hearse or Fairies. I don't know, I don't have all the answers here, but that's kind of where my head's at. So, Brian, ultimately, like, we 5-0'd with your deck. You're doing something cool here. Is the cool thing that you are doing actually good enough to be worth those 5 slots? And I think the answer is no. So Sword of the Meek did roughly 3 points of damage throughout the league. It represented a few more points with a broadside throw, I think. But I think Sword of the Meek just like attached to a Goblin Rabblemaster for a Goblin Rabblemaster token for a couple points of damage. But I'm into 8 Blood Moon effects in the main deck. I am into that part. All right, folks, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. If you need some cards, consider checking out my sponsor using promo code ThrabenU when you do. And yeah, just get out there, keep on rabbling. See ya.